Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Dr. Steve Novella, who is a clinical neurologist at Yale, and he is the president and co-founder of the New England Skeptical Society. Steve, real pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, Doug.
So this concept of being skeptical is very interesting to me, but just tell me, how did you get to be involved in the Skeptical Society? What is that?
Well, it's essentially a movement, a group of people who are interested in science, critical thinking, the public understanding of science, and the relationship between those things, between science and popular culture, and pretty much everything that we do. So it's essentially saying that people are easy to deceive. We deceive ourselves very easily. Our brains are very powerful but flawed instruments. And so you need to have some kind of a rational critical thinking methodology in order to figure out what's true in the world and what isn't true.
So how can people become critical thinkers?
Well, like everything, it's a journey. It's not a destination. I don't think it's a binary thing where you either are or not a critical thinker. There are people who are critically at different times in different situations or to different degrees. Pretty much everyone who goes to buy a used car is probably going to go through some critical thinking there. Kick the tires, look at the mileage. You're not going to just automatically trust everything the used car salesman says to you. But then at other times, maybe you might be a little less critical in your analysis of claims, maybe because they're appealing to you or because you're just not aware that you should be more cautious. But there is also a pretty extensive skill set involved. There's a lot of knowledge about how science works, about logic and logical fallacies, all of the various things that bias the way our mind works, the way our brain processes information, the fallacies of human memory. So knowledge of all of those things help you compensate for them, help you, be a more clear, rational, critical thinker.
So how does trust fit in with that? One of the things I often find is funny is people will go out and they'll spend hours and hours buying a $50 pair of jeans, but if I speak to them, my day job is that I'm a financial advisor, I'll speak to them and, in 1 minute they'll make a $500,000 decision. And I often think that's kind of funny, right? And I mean, ultimately I know it's because we've developed trust over the years, but where's the trust and the critical thinking, where do they either come together or do they never come together?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and more broadly, we are thinking of trust in terms of authority. Like you are an authority on financial decision making, and so people trust your authority and make decisions based upon that. And that's a double-edged sword for a critical thinker because there are certainly certain institutions, people, groups of people. The consensus of scientific opinion, for example, where it's a professional, hard-won consensus that deserves a bit of respect for their authority, for their expertise, but not surrender, right? You always want to at least reserve the right to think about what you're being told, to evaluate it, to see if it actually does deserve your continued trust. And also, nothing is infallible. Nothing and nobody is beyond the ability to make a mistake. So you're always open to revision. If new information comes down the pike that maybe the scientific consensus is not correct, you're willing to revise your opinion. So we don't generally recommend a complete rejection of all authority just as a knee-jerk. That's more of a contrarian view, not really a skeptical view. We do think that you do need to afford the proper respect to proper expertise, but while still reserving the right to sort of judge things for yourself.
I think one of the problems with that for someone who's not necessarily a professional in some area, the one that's coming to mind now is the issue of global warming. You speak to some people, they say every scientist on the planet, including, the UN board of 2,000 scientists says that we're destroying the environment. So you say, wow, okay, what do I know about, compared to 2,000 scientists? And then you hear other people tell you, they show you information that seems quite the contrary. And as a layman, and this just happens to be an area in which I'm a layman, how can you figure out which way to go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So climatology is a very complex, well-developed science. You have absolutely no chance, unless you are a working science as a climatologist, you have absolutely no chance of understanding the technical literature in sufficient detail in order to be able to make your own individual judgment about what the evidence shows. So you have to spend years, decades, studying something in great detail before you could have the sufficient expertise where you can have your own opinion about it, to be honest with you. So what do you do, as you say? And that's where you sort of are forced to trust other scientists, to trust scientists and the consensus of scientific opinion. So then the question becomes, well, how do you know what the consensus of scientific opinion is? Because different people will tell you different things about that. And that's an art and a skill set unto itself. Knowing like what kinds of institutions deserve to be taken seriously, what kinds of institutions likely have an ideological axe to grind, and you should be suspicious of their conclusions. I'd be much more likely to believe an academic institution than I would, say, an ideological institution that's dedicated to libertarian politics. Their scientific opinions are more likely to be filtered through their political ideology than an academic institution is. But, you can always think of potential conflicts of interest.
Sure. I mean, that's what everyone always tells you. They say, well, Al Gore is the one, who owns the carbon trading exchanges. So you begin to feel like, where could you possibly make a decision?
But Al Gore is not why we think that global warming is real. Because I would just
he made that movie. I thought. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was political. It was a non-scientist, putting his ideas forward. So you have to listen to the consensus of scientific opinion, and there are ways to evaluate that. I mean, there are published studies that do things like evaluate what scientists are saying, and there are committees of scientists whose job it is to review the scientific evidence and to describe what it is, and you have to learn how to read those documents to say what they're really saying. So, it's in an area where you are not an expert. First of all, I do think that people need to have a basic level of scientific literacy. If you don't have a certain minimum level of civil scientific literacy, then you really have no chance. You can't even decide who to believe and who not to believe. If you're working from a basic skill set of critical thinking and a basic scientific literacy, then you have a reasonable chance of at least understanding who to listen to and is what they're saying plausible, does it make sense, or are there serious reasons to doubt what they're saying? But, that's not easy itself, but you can get there as a non-scientist if you have those basic skill sets.
Okay. We are speaking with Steve Novella, who is at Yale University School of Medicine. He's also the president and co-founder of the New England Skeptical Society. He's been talking to us about how people can become critical thinkers. We've been talking about climate because that's what sort of came to mind. But, Steve, this is a personal finance show, and there's plenty of area to be skeptical in the world of personal finance. And one of the things you said is people have to develop a basic skill set, which is why I'm proud to do the radio show, and I write educational articles in plain English so that people can learn, because I agree with you that people need to develop the basic skills. But even with all of that, you still find that people get scammed, and they get, the Bernard Madoffs of the world find lots and lots of easy targets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's our experience that anyone can get scammed, right? There's always somebody out there that knows something you don't know, and they can use that knowledge to exploit your relative ignorance. Being scammed doesn't mean you're a fool, doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you're human. And it just means there was somebody out there who's just a little bit smarter than you were, and that's everybody. There's no way you can completely 100% protect yourself from ever being scammed. But you certainly don't want to be an easy target, right? You don't want to be the low-hanging fruit for the scam artists out there, and they are out there. And that's where the basic critical thinking and skill set comes into place. There's a lot of generic rules that, everyone will recognize, like if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But you'll be amazed at how often people ignore that simple rule. There isn't a prince in Nigeria who wants to send you $10 million. That's not true.
No, I think you're mistaken.
Email,
that guy in Nigeria is sending me emails all the time. I often think it's like, one day I'm going to go up to heaven and I'm going to say to God, why didn't you make me a millionaire? I'll say, Doug, I sent you emails every day offering you the deal, and you never took me up on it.
So there are so-called red flags that you got to look out for. If people are invoking like Bill Gates or like some celebrity name or institution that is, if what they're saying is full of hyperbole, if they're invoking conspiracy theories, those are the things that con artists use in order to draw you in, to lure you in. So just assume something's a scam right out of the gate, and then until you prove that it isn't, that's probably a good approach.
And it doesn't hard to do any sort of business, though, you know?
Yeah, it's just like, just assume that the used car dealer is trying to sell you a lemon until you really, have it checked out by your own mechanic, or at least do some basic evaluation. Look it up on Carfax.com or whatever those. Now there are websites where you can check things out. Same thing. The internet's a wonderful tool. Honestly, if anything that gets presented to you, if you go into Google and type that thing, scam, and just see what comes up, 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, somebody has already thoroughly investigated it for you and will give you a detailed explanation of why it is or is not a scam. There are websites dedicated to that.
Yeah, let me try that. Stephen Novella, holy cow. No, it's a real issue. I mean, listen, you have to also find a balance between that and living a life of paranoia.
Yeah. Well, it's not paranoia if they're really out to get you, right? So, no, I understand you have to be able to live your life and not just be consumed with this. But yeah, when like you say, before I invested $500,000 in a stock, I would invest some time in investigating whether or not it was real before somebody tells you that they're going to get better returns than the average on the market. You and I know that's gambling, right?
Right.
The market is designed to destroy information, right? If anyone really had a secret information that they could use to beat the market would destroy that information very quickly. So anyone who says that they can consistently beat the market is either they get their insider trading, almost by definition, or they're lying, or they're self-deluded. They just got lucky, and now they think that their system works rather than their system is worthless, and they just got lucky.
You mean they might just be sort of the black? Listen, there are people who go on TV and they say, "I predict that the stock market's going to do X, Y, Z on such and such a day," and it turns out that it does. Occasionally this happens.
Oh, hey, so half the people are going to do better than average by chance. Right, and
that's just the definition.
If you think, the definition. So and you could also say then you take those people, and then the next time half of them are going to do better by chance, and so after 8 or 9 iterations of that, you're still going to have a few percentage of people who've done better than average the last 8 or 9 times they've made a big decision, and those people have to be out there, even if every system is completely worthless. So just the fact that they've done well in the past actually doesn't predict that they're going to do well in the future, because those people are out there who have done well by chance alone. That's just statistics, right?
Yeah, so that's actually, I think that's a very good point, is that even in my field, we often talk about the reversion to the mean, and when you look at, for example, mutual funds, people always love to buy the 5-star mutual fund, wow, because it's so great, but when you look at over time, over 5-10 years, you'll find that the funds that were top performing actually become underperformers, so that over that 10-year period, they become average, because kind of by definition, everyone's going to be average.
Right. Right. Regression to the mean, exactly. But if you're just cherry picking up time when they happen to be doing well, they can use that to make the case that their system works. But as you say, when you actually study these things long term, nobody's got the magic system.
Right. I think that's very important, and that's why you have to do your work step by step, develop a reasonable plan and reasonable expectations.
Exactly. There's no substitute for actual analysis. There's no system. There's no way to beat the system with some mathematical trick or something. You have to actually do the hard work of actual analysis.
Oh, man, hard work. All right, let's end with that. We'll tell people listening to do some hard work. We've been talking with Dr. Stephen Novella, who is a clinical neurologist at Yale University School of Medicine. He's the president and co-founder of the New England Skeptical Society. Stephen, the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people follow your work?
So probably the best way to get plugged into all the things that I do is to go to theskepticsguide.org. That's the homepage of my podcast, and from there you could find my blogs and other things that I produce. I've done a couple of courses for the teaching company. One is a really good overview of critical thinking skills called Your Deceptive Mind. So that's kind of the portal into everything that I do, theskepticsguide.org.
Okay, so I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll put links to those websites in the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com, so everyone can just find it real easily.
That would be great.
All right, Steve, thanks so much for your time.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.